Welcome to the Matt Laricy Project. This is a show about all things real estate, business, marketing, and entrepreneurship. Each show consists of myself, Matt Laricy, and a member of my team and a guest. This week, the Matt Laricy Group team member joining us is Matt Piazza. Matt, how we doing?
Good.
And for those of you guys that don't know, Matt is a fellow SSN, which we call Southside Nasty, from the South Side.
It's not in the script.
It's in the script. And we grew up playing hockey together. I was the better hockey player than him, playing at an NHL prospect level, and Matt was like the guy that was always trying to be on the team with me.
We can edit this, I guess. I'll give you that. Sure.
Okay. And this week's guest, we got Eric Flanagan. Eric, and we're talking about for episode 7, how to develop in Chicago. Eric, we got to know each other actually as client relationship first.
Right.
Helped you buy a place here in Chicago.
My first project.
Your first project, right? And since then you've kind of exploded on the scene here. How long have you been in Chicago in general? Because you got a little bit of an accent here.
Yeah, so I've been in America for about 11 years. Did a couple of years up in Madison, Wisconsin, finishing college and doing grad school. I'm probably in Chicago 8 years this year.
Where are you from originally then?
So I'm from Dublin in Ireland.
Okay, and since Chicago's got such a big Irish population, is it kind of like the same thing as Dublin, would you say?
Yeah, pretty much. And
Yeah.
then once you're involved in construction, then it's probably more Irish than it is in Dublin these days.
So you see a lot of Irish background in the building game?
Yeah, a lot of guys that are in their 40s and 50s came over in the late 90s. There's a lot of those guys are pretty big in the scene. Younger Irish people, I think there's just less of generally because of the way immigration is now.
Sure.
In America, it's just hard to be here. So I've made more Irish friends than I've ever had in America by being involved in construction in Chicago.
Why do you think so many people with an Irish background is getting into the building?
I think a lot of them come over with trades themselves and then, take their trade to the next level, start developing their own projects. A lot of them do some of their own work as well. So, yeah, I think a lot of the smaller builders are Irish.
That's an interesting point because right now in America, one of the biggest things I read all the time is that we are not getting involved in the trades at all. And it's actually becoming a real problem is getting enough labor. So it's actually funny to hear that other people are coming here because we're not kind of providing that product, which is kind of crazy. So, what made you kind of want to get into the development game? What was your background that made you get here?
Yeah, so I was in a fraternity at Wisconsin, and we
Which frat was that?
Delta Upsilon.
Okay.
The shout out, first shout out of my adult life.
Can we tag them on this here, just so they could see? I thought he could be wearing a shirt. Sorry.
Yeah. We had a landmarked house on the lake up there, and as I was finishing school, they were bringing in an ordinance in the city that all of those kind of facilities needed to have sprinkler systems. So that was kind of a push that I made to, rather than put a sprinkler system in, to gut renovate this historical landmark. So that was kind of an effort that I led as a volunteer, and I was on a visa at the time, so I couldn't have another job, but I could volunteer, and so essentially.
But you can manage. Right.
Could manage.
Yes.
So over maybe 4 or 5 years, led full gut renovation. It was a $2.5 million renovation of this landmarked building. Took it through the landmarks process, changed some of the elements of the building all the way through to the completion of that project. So I was a member. There was other people involved, build team, but then we had architects, we had engineers, we had a general contractor. So at the end of that, I was like, all right. I could do that again. And right after that, I got my green card, so I started looking for my first piece of property. Once I had my green card, I could have 2 jobs, the job that I was here for and develop. And that's when we met, and you helped me get my first property.
Yeah, and just out of curiosity, did membership in the fraternity go up once the house was redone?
The house, in the 5 years since it's done, has regressed 100 years to its pre-renovation state. It's at steady frat level now, never to improve again.
What's your favorite bar up at Wisconsin?
Mondays.
Mondays?
Yeah.
Ashley, my wife, is a huge fan of the KK. Her and her friends KK, swear by it. We got to go there. Every time we're there, we got to go there. I feel like I'm 100 years old when I walk in.
So the KK is like the rock solid that especially if you're Greek, and then most frats would have like a sub bar that they would go to before the KK. So Mondays is my loyal shout out.
Okay.
KK is my, my badge of pride.
Okay, so covering the fraternity game and now getting into development. So how, we're talking about that you bought your first place here, got your first development going. How did you get started, like with let's say even like the financial background to get into that?
Sure. I mean, what makes you a developer is being able to put the deal together, right? So even if you like to renovate a home, if you can't pay for it yourself or find investors to do it, you're not a developer, right? You're probably not doing anything at all.
Right.
So, it's family and friends money, like a lot of people that start out. Really was interested in doing a project. Some people in my family had some money that wasn't doing anything.
Right.
And I said, this is something I'm interested in doing. I think I've carved out an opportunity here. These are what the numbers are. This is what the return is like. And so that's how I was able to purchase my first piece of land.
Were you nervous that maybe you couldn't deliver and that you would spend your family's money and they would hate you and you'd be always known as a guy that stole their cash from them?
Yeah, if you can't live with that, you're never going to make it in construction, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's the same with a lot of different. Now I use different money from different sources. Whether it's even a large fund that might be sitting on $50 million and they're paying $400,000 for a piece of land. It might seem inconsequential, but you don't want to lose their money. You don't want to lose anyone's money. So, you try to vary the source of money that you take, but so far. Getting returns for investors is actually the easiest part, right? Because they're getting paid at first.
Right.
It's how can you create a deal as a developer? Whereas if you're not hitting the top number that you pro forma, if there's a shift in the market like we're seeing right now,
right,
how am I getting paid? What's the deal structure to make sure that my efforts are getting paid over, the life of a project? The investors are always getting paid, and if you can't guarantee your investor is getting paid, you shouldn't do the project. Yeah,
and that's kind of the thing too, because if you want to make it in the development game, you got to have a reputation as well of somebody that pays their investors, because if you start getting a bad reputation, I'm assuming it's probably harder to get money.
Right. For sure. You're constantly servicing a relationship. You're also, one thing that bothers me as well is, that reputation is so key, right? So it's like every project I do, I realize the small expenses here and there that add up at the end that make you look like you didn't think of them at the beginning.
Right.
So as each project goes, now I'm nailing down every single expense, dollar for dollar for dollar. So if something comes along later on, I'm able to say, this is it,
So and kind of talking about that. So there's a lot of people that have no idea what a developer or how the development works. You know what I mean? Like you hear this, and I'll be honest, when I first got in the business, before my old man taught me this, I was always like, oh, developer, that sounds cool. But I actually didn't ask, what is this? So for our listeners out there, what is it? So how do you get into, what's the first step of development? Is it getting the financing? Is it securing the land?
Yeah, 100%. Getting the financing.
Okay.
Everyone's going to say when you're looking for land, it's cash, right? And I guess a big secret in development is you're always signing cash offers and you're hoping it's never 100% cash, right?
Right.
You're hoping that you're able, in the short period of time between getting it under contract for cash and closing, that you're able to take your financing relationships in banks and close with financing. If you can't, obviously, you're going to have to come up with the cash.
So what do you do? So you got the cash, and then you identify a property?
Then you identify a piece of land. I mean, in Chicago, you're pretty much doing that with a relationship with a realtor. Very, very hard to do on your own. Some of the better developers that I know really have a long pipeline of projects that they've cultivated on their own. And that's obviously worth something for them because they also have their realtor's license. They hang their plaque somewhere. They sell their own projects. You're saving them commissions. For someone like me, and the majority of other developers out there, you have existing relationships with realtors who are going to bring you a piece of land.
So you get the land brought to you. You got the financing. Next step would be closing on the property?
Next step is closing on the property, but even before you're closing on the property, especially if it's fall, winter is coming in, you're starting to do everything that you would do even before you own that property.
And that would be what would that entail?
You're getting the plans straight away. You're creating the business entity, the LLC that you're going to use to close on the land. You're beginning your plans. If you're reusing plans or you were quick to get plans, you're submitting for permits before you own the land.
Got it.
Best case scenario is you're closing on the land around the same time you're getting your permits. There's going to be a couple weeks, because you can't cut off utilities until you own the land. But for the most part, you're trying to hustle. That's the developer's busiest time in a project, is the very, very beginning.
Okay, so then now you got all that stuff. You got the ordinances, the permits. You close on the land. Do you already have like a builder lined up that's going to actually build it? Do you have a team on place? Like, how are people mostly doing that?
Yeah, for sure. A lot of smaller developers in Chicago, GC their own projects,
Okay.
so they are the builder. And then a lot of people don't. A lot of people, but I like to have a GC because I have another job, but also because I'm able to share that risk and that liability on a project.
Right.
The other key thing about Chicago to know is if you're not building a lot all the time, you are not going to get serviced by your subs, right? They
Got
are
it.
going to leave you for someone else that's doing a project that they do more work for.
So is that because they always want to stay busy and stuff like that? Or?
Yeah, it's because there's a certain amount of loyalty to someone that's
Right, their
keeping them
loyalty is
busy.
to them so that they get the next one and the next one and the next one.
For
right?
sure. So if they need to, show up for the guy that builds 3 houses a year or the guy they build 30 houses a year for.
So it's a relationship-driven business as well with that.
So I like to use a general contractor that's building at a high enough volume that he knows what's going on, but that he can get people to show up for him. People
Okay.
showing up for him is people showing up for me. Project moves fast.
Right. So you got the GC, you started to build. From there till the finished product, is there anything else that a developer's kind of doing? Or is this kind of like the machine's kind of working itself at this point?
Machine works. A developer is always busy. I mean, if you let a GC take over your project just because he started building it, you don't know what you're going to end up with.
Got
And
it.
if you end up with crap, you're not going to be able to sell it,
So,
and everyone
does a
loses.
developer work hand in hand with deciding what type of property, what it's going to look like, everything all the way down to the studs, or are you kind of just like, this is what we want, go with it?
Yeah, I'm doing everything,
Okay.
actually, barred building it. So I'm doing the design at the beginning. I'm getting a rendering that I'm honing in on the look that I want, the brick that I want. I'm giving that to the GC to go and find me the brick that I've already picked.
So basically, you sign off on everything that they're going to do.
And
Yeah.
are you visiting the site often?
Visiting the site all the time.
On average, just out of curiosity, how often do you think you would visit a site of something that's getting built?
3 times a week.
Okay,
4
so
times
you're,
a week.
you're kind of there to make sure that your presence is felt, and that maybe I also kind of feel is that I hate to say it, but I think a lot of builders and GCs sometimes can get a little cocky. So like if you're not showing up, they may take advantage of you as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. And
know?
even small stuff that might not be in a detailed, not detailed set of plan. Developers aren't using plans that are incredibly detailed. So you're leaving a lot up to interpretation on the site. But you'll get a guy that'll, put a zigzag of lights in the ceiling and
Right.
be like, looks good. And then he's going to the next job, right?
Yeah.
So you need to be there because there's a time to change stuff. And
Right.
if you're on site, you can be like, this is bullshit.
Right.
You need to change this right now. And they'll huff and haw, but they'll do it.
Right.
If you miss that and it's drywalled,
Yeah.
you've got a
Then
huge
you're like
problem.
this guy. So all the stuff you visited, and now the product's pretty much completed. It's just then putting it on the market
Yep.
and selling like a typical real estate transaction.
Right.
And then I think, for some of our listeners out there, I think this is a big thing. 'Cause, obviously we're in real estate. Typically the developers want to try to get the product back to the person that got them the product in the first place. Is that kind
Right.
of like how it works for the most part?
Yeah, that would
It's
be
kind
the
of unwritten
understanding.
kind of rule.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oftentimes written rule.
Okay, so it's in the contracts.
It's very quickly on in a relationship. When someone brings you land, if they work with other builders,
Okay.
that they'll make you, sign essentially a listing agreement.
Now, are those guys getting any extra bonuses on top of that for bringing that, or is there?
Some people do.
Okay.
I would say that's probably a new school way of thinking.
Okay.
I think a lot of the older realtors who are maybe more relationship based
Right.
aren't charging you on top of the sales that they're going to get.
Right, so no finder's fee. It's just kind of like, and that, by the way, guys, we call that a finder's fee. If you bring a property to a developer, you get paid a commission usually from closing on it. But a lot of brokers will actually also charge a finder's fee. So it's a bonus from the developer, or investor group to get paid for them bringing them just this product, and they'll shop it usually to a couple investors. Is that usually the case?
Right.
And whoever gives them, if somebody doesn't give them that bonus fee, then maybe we'll give it to somebody else. Is that kind of like how it works?
I think that's it. And I think in situations like that, it's hard to feel like you're really building a personal relationship because if someone's
More
putting
like an
some
auctioneer.
Right, exactly. And
well,
so
I think in a thing that and for our real estate professionals out there listening is a lesson to be learned is that the reality is that right now the market has been really good, but as Eric mentioned earlier, the market is starting to shift, and the people who have built a really good relationship, people always want to fight a little bit harder for the guy that they've been working hand in hand with than the guy that they only worked with because they got paid to be working with him. And I think that's what you're meaning when you're talking about like building a relationship.
Right.
Because you want to work with also who you like. And, I always work harder for my guys that want to work harder for me. And I also want to something vice versa. So, kind of going off of that too, like what is your favorite part of that process? So like we went over the steps of it. Like, what do you like doing the most?
So I do everything on our projects. I meet with vendors that are doing all the plumbing fixtures. I design all the kitchens, meet with those people. I do paint colors. I pick all the tile. So I don't know. There's good parts of every single project. Framing is fun if it's a house because it happens fast. So you go from a hole in the ground to a big one. But really when the things that you've picked start to go in, when tile is in, that's a good feeling. When a kitchen's in, that's a good feeling. I mean, that all comes together at the end. And it is the way you imagined it or envisaged it.
Right.
Feels great.
What's the worst part that can happen during this whole process?
The worst part is probably when you're digging in the ground. That's where the most unknown money's going to go. If you need to do shoring, you put steel on the side of a foundation to make sure that the building next door doesn't, fall over.
And they call that shoring?
They call it shoring. So
Okay.
you're shoring up your site. I mean, that could be incredibly expensive. So that's always the part I hate.
Okay.
And then once you're past shoring, then everything tends to be pretty good.
Okay.
Floors are nerve-wracking. If you do a floor wrong,
It's a big expense.
it's a big expense.
So what do you and when we're talking about like the shoring aspects and this stuff, like is there anything like you're looking for when you're scouting for like a new project so that people are you got agents bring you stuff, you said maybe every now and then you're kind of looking yourself, like is there something that you look for that you're like, wow, this is a winner, this is a project I want to take on?
It's interesting. I'm looking at the numbers mostly
So
right
you're all
now.
numbers.
I'm all numbers, and probably maybe to my own detriment a little bit. I know people that will spend a lot to build in, an A-plus location, but I know because of what they're paying for the land and what it costs to build and kind of a firm comp that they're building for incredibly small margins. Right. I might take something that I see in maybe not as good a location, but I know what I can build it for. I'm getting the land for this. I'm hoping if I build a good enough product, I can get someone to live in this A- or B location in new construction, so it gives me a bigger margin.
And
bigger
the returns are bigger, a little more margin. But if you do that first project, like the one that you described first, if you do that 100 times, it starts to add up, right? Is that kind of the bigger developer's idea?
Yeah.
Do more projects for that little bit of return?
I think so. You're just not protected from a swing in the market, though, when you do that. So, I mean, when times are good, that's a great way to do it, right? Make 50 grand 5 times a year versus, making 250 grand once a year. But you also need to have good service from the realtors that you're working with. You need someone that's going to bring you that land first. And that will always be my struggle. Because of the size of the developer I am, is you're probably a lot of the time not getting service the best piece of land off the bat. And so when I talk to a lot of realtors I work with, I'm like, hey, one day you're going to have to bring me something that you're bringing to me that you're not bringing to someone else as kind of a token of our relationship together and a sign of that we like to work together.
How do you feel some of these guys are bringing you that land? Like how do they find it? I know of a lot of and it's not something we personally do, but I know a lot of guys that only service new construction.
Right.
How do you feel that they're finding land? Are they door knocking? Are they seeing a piece of land, doing the numbers, and then presenting to you and then making an offer on the place? I mean, I've heard of all different games of how people do it.
Yeah, I'd say they're door knocking a lot.
Yeah.
I'd say they're looking up tax records as well. That's the first thing I'll do if I see a property I think is derelict, or maybe it's a commercial right now, and I'll just look it up online and see who owns it and maybe make a call. I'd say for a lot of new construction, kind of single families and 3 units in those neighborhoods, they're just door knocking. They're trying to find someone that's maybe a little older. The house doesn't have any potential for rehab, and they're putting
saying,
offers
like, hey,
out there.
You could get this at this price. So, and talking about like how the numbers being thinner and things of that nature. I mean, one of the things that you talk about is like, we're kind of in a shifting market, and I know when the bubble burst, a lot of people ask, I know me personally, a lot of people are like, how did so many people go bankrupt? And one of the things that I used to see was that, for a lot of people that don't know it's kind of like owning a restaurant for some of these people, is that they take their wealth, and they may be very wealthy, but they take all of it and spread it out across, 30 projects. And if the market tanks and all their wealth is now worth half of what they paid for it,
right,
they can't sustain, because you still have taxes and people you have to pay back to keep these things going. So what's the number that makes you feel comfortable with, where you're like, hey, this percentage is what I know gets me going to move on a project?
Yeah, high teens for an overall ROI on a project. The high teens.
Okay.
I'm sure that there's all sorts of people will hear me say that and disagree with that.
Sure.
That's risky. I also know people who work for a 10% return, and that would be on a total project, so not just the money that you're putting in. The return on the money you put in is as a percentage is much bigger than the ROI of a total project. But I think overall, being in that high teens, lets there be a 10% shift, and you should be able to sell your projects in time, pay out your investors,
right, and get moving on it. What so like we're talking about profits and things of this nature. Like, what can you tell? Like what are things that like a lot of developers and builders will actually like cheap out on? Like, is there certain things that like right away like look for this, or what are things that you see?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, if your home is incredibly highly finished, right? So there's wainscoting everywhere and crown everywhere and built-in stuff everywhere. I would be looking at what kind of material that is. It should be, plywood in a more expensive home.
Sure.
Not like particle board that's painted. A lot of it is particle board. So if you're going into a price point that, isn't $1.2 million and your house is covered in trim, it's probably not great. Like, if you spill a glass of water on it, it'll fold out like an accordion. So
that's a test, guys. Throw water on all the ways and see what happens.
Yeah. I think trim is a big one. But, short of that, I mean, most builders that I see are still doing the same when it comes to insulation, when it comes to HVAC systems, when it comes to roof, when it comes to appliances. And, new construction, that's what you're getting. You're getting new systems. Yeah. And new systems are good.
Yeah, I mean.
Is there something that, as like a broker, you're not in the construction game, you don't know as much as, say, a developer, a general contractor, or anything like that. Is there something that, like, you would say we could look for, or other brokers out there could look for with their buyers to be like, hey, this is, maybe a little iffy, maybe not. Is it certain things they would cheap out on material-wise, if you don't know
the water test, dude.
The water test? Yeah. But I mean, is there more than that? Like, should you be looking at a certain thing? Is it like a price point where there's too much in here type thing? Or
I think a lot of prices have too much in there, and sometimes that's not even necessarily cheap product. There was a new construction in Bucktown I was in over the summer, and they just had wall-to-wall handleless built-ins, right? This place was like, a modern marvel.
Right.
And when I walked it, I said to the broker, I said, so where do I put my stuff? And she said, what? And I was like, I have stuff. Like, you've staged this with one sectional,
right,
and you have ornaments on all of these built-ins, but where would I put my own stuff?
Right.
And she,
yeah,
because it was so overbuilt.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of buyers see that twinkle in when they walk into something and they get a lot. But, I would say that look at the systems, talk about the HVAC systems, talk about the roof, talk about radiant heat and floor in the basement. If you're getting all of that stuff, I wouldn't think that your quality is any different to something that's finished at a higher level.
Yeah, I kind of always say that too. Is that I feel like a lot of builders and developers will do the glitz and the glam, is how I call it. Is that they'll do a really nice master bath. They'll do an unbelievable kitchen.
Right.
And then they got like the shittiest doors I've ever seen.
Right.
There's like there's not even like any baseboards. You know what I mean? Like it's just a total shit product.
Right.
And they got like engineered hardwood floors in the house.
Right, but the last thing you remember is the red knobs on the stove, and they're like, let's buy this.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I will say that personally, what I've been seeing lately, because for a lot of people, they don't know, is like the market is kind of shifting right now, and you're starting to see, the numbers have kind of gone down on these things, and then the price of goods have gone up on everything, labor, material, all this stuff, and the developers are making this profit. So I know one thing I've personally seen is insulation has probably been the biggest issue. Is that I've actually had 2 developers not put insulation in, and they forgot. I don't know how it got passed, but it didn't happen, and they had to redo it. So I mean, there is some stuff that we just can't tell, which kind of makes it a little bit, more difficult on that front.
So that question on insulation is spray versus bat. Bat is the thing that everyone knows. It's, the rollout, kind of paper-sided candy, whatever floss, versus cotton candy, paper-covered cotton candy insulation. Versus a spray foam. Now, there's nothing wrong with the cotton candy. It's just, its R value's a little less. I wouldn't be put off in buying a house necessarily if they had that, but that's a good question to ask. Is it sprayed?
Okay. And what's the biggest pet peeve you see, like maybe some of your competitors do that that they do a lot? They're just like, this is just bullshit.
I just see so much over design, and it really annoys me when people think it's nice, to be honest. It's like... I don't know, like jet black metal railings that crisscross and black trim over everything and kind of black doors and just stuff that panel, the whole place is paneled and, you could go on forever and it's forcing a style. I don't personally like it. I think the majority of people shouldn't like it. But I think one thing I know generally is a lot of buyers aren't that creative.
Right.
And so when they walk into somewhere, they want to see it finished and not have to think about anything at all.
And the sexy new construction look, and then a lot of people would think like you did, where do I put my stuff?
Where do I put my stuff?
They're like, this place is awesome.
But that's society these days is, Instagram is taking away our imagination. So if we can't actually see exactly how we want it, we just feel like there's something wrong with it.
Right.
So, and talking about that, like, what about a trend? Is there a certain trend you're seeing developers do that you're just like, there's no way this is going to stick? Because, like, I remember back in, like, 04 to 06, there was that Euro Bowl sink that everybody had to have. And then by 2009, people were like, what the hell were people thinking? I know one of the things I'm seeing now is, white cabinets with gold handles, a lot of different, like, high-end wallpaper. I mean, is there one thing that you see that people put in that you're like, there's no way this is going to last and it's going to be dated, like, tomorrow?
Golds and brass are in. I just moved into my own new construction house.
Yeah.
Golds and brass,
Love it.
accents all over the place.
I mean, I like it. I'm just saying, like,
yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Did you hate your builder?
I loved it.
Was the project on time?
Yeah, just too early. We were moving in day one.
Okay.
Day one. Navy cabinets, dark cabinets are in right now.
Yeah.
I like that navy look.
Yep.
Do you think the Navy will
I
stick?
have
So
Navy
like
cabinets in my.
I mean, so like here, one thing I've been saying with the Navies though, the one thing I'm a little bit nervous about is because we are in Chicago, and I do think like some people have been going over the top with some of these Navy looks, and I feel like it looks like too nautical.
Right.
Like where I feel like I'm walking into a boathouse where I'm in New England, and I'm like, we're in Chicago.
The beach look,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
that beach house.
And it even
look.
got like the beach shit on the walls. It's like a little, to me, I think it's over the top. I could be wrong though.
Yeah.
I'm not into design. Do you think that's what's your feelings on this?
There's a lot of ways to use it. I mean, I have totally flat panel cabinetry in my place. It leans a little more modern, so I have navy base, white uppers. You wouldn't get any nautical feeling in my place at all. It all depends how you use it. And I mean, some places, if you walk into somewhere, you should see nice accents of these trends, right? If you think the whole place is on trend, it's not going to be really soon. You want to be able for a trend to dip and for your elements of that trend to kind of last.
So kind of taking pieces, more or less. What about, we talked about like a little bit like of technology and social media we just mentioned there. Like how has technology at all like helped developers at all like get ahead quicker? I mean, like in real estate, it's a big disruptor, obviously, in a lot of different aspects. And, for us, it's been an advantage. But for developers, has it affected at all? Like, or even like Instagram and all, or social, like any of that stuff?
Yeah, I think it helps with design, right? It helps you see what other people are doing. It helps you get a feeling for trends. I mean, obviously, just straight up communication, talking to other developers and realtors is good. But you can pick up on stuff. If you look at houses that are on the market, you can see brick is on the way out, right? Like,
Really? What's taking its place?
I think sided homes. People are looking for more affordable price points, right? And if you can knock $200,000 off the price of a house and build a totally fine sided home, I think the value of brick is departing in this market. So before it would have been all brick garage, lot line to lot line. Now I think people are looking for a more affordable price point, so they don't mind not having a rooftop on their house. Pitched roof, sided homes, a little more traditional. I think that's a result of the
What's the
slowing
advantage
market.
of using brick versus non-brick? Why should a consumer want it or not want it?
At the end of the day, with 90% of the houses that have brick, it's still a frame house anyway.
Right.
And so, they would say it probably has a longer life, right? Like if siding's going to last 30 years, brick is going to last 70 years. But, most people aren't living in homes that long.
Especially like we work in the downtown markets. I mean, let's face it, it's a 5 to 10 year play for most people in any place they're in.
And if I own my sided home outright in 30 years, I'll probably have enough cash to just put some new siding on it, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's right. And what about like Hardie board's been a big thing that since you mentioned brick, what's your feeling is on Hardie boards? I've heard of like a lot of mixed reactions with different people.
Like for the flat panel Hardie board?
Correct.
Again, I think it comes down to, you see some townhome developments, Rehnquist do some nice townhome developments, and they use that kind of flat Hardie board in creative ways. It gives a good design. I bet people wouldn't complain too much about that.
Right.
I think when you see, sprinkling a brick on the front of a house and then, that rest of the house just wrapped in flat panel Hardie with those seams and it looks wavy and
Right.
weird like it's a cardboard box,
Right.
that's probably where you're getting the kickback,
Got it.
As a medium in my West End house that you brought me the land for, I did stucco sides, and that was just a much nicer look. I didn't get any feedback.
Any negative feedback?
Any negative feedback on that.
That's good. Usually inspectors get like really mad about stucco in Chicago.
Yeah, stucco's good.
Yeah.
Stucco's a good product.
What about and talking about like that place that you built in West Sound, like zoning wise? Because I know like that place, I think it was zoned differently than what you ended up building. That's a big question I hear people all the time again. Like, what is zoning? How do people get it? Like,
Right.
Maybe you could get into that a little bit. Like, what is like? You go to the city. Is that what you do? You go to the city and you request
You're
something?
going to go to your alderman first, and you're going to say you have this piece of land under contract and you're interested in rezoning it.
Okay.
And most wards are going to kick you to a neighborhood group if there is a neighborhood group that your property sits in. You're going to present to your neighborhood group, and the neighborhood group are going to recommend to the alderman whether they approve or don't approve.
Okay.
But it's Chicago, so like ultimately the alderman, has final say, could go against a neighborhood group. But
Are they against you? Like, do aldermen mostly want new places to come in? I mean, I would think they do because Chicago is broke, and that means more tax dollars off new construction.
Yeah.
But are they pushing more for new construction? Or are they?
It depends. In West Town, that was zoned for a single-family home on a block that had a lot of multi-unit zoning and three units and two duplex buildings. So I thought it wouldn't have been out of character with the block to try to build multiple units there. But that neighborhood group, who all lived in single families, aren't in favor of that kind of what's called upzoning.
Right.
When you can build more densely, when you're asking to build more densely on a piece of land.
So upzoning means building more densely.
Yep.
And then so like a lot of stuff is like R3, 4, things of that nature. So we're just talking that's residential 3 stories, residential 4 stories, right?
Not necessarily. R3 is residential. It's a single-family home zoning. And then R4 is the first zoning you can get to when you can do multiple units. And you're still probably only doing 3 floors above the basement on an R4. You can also build in B zoning or C zoning, which is business or commercial.
Got it.
So I just recently had my first success with a zoning change, if you will, and that was in B zoning.
So you went from B to R or R to B?
No, I stayed within B, but
Okay.
it was a smaller B lot, so I was able to put a third unit on a piece of land that was only big enough for 2. And I was able to waive the requirement of having to have a store on the first floor.
Wow. And so things like that, one thing I hear all the time is like a lot of stuff is R4 zoning. So you can't build bigger than the 4 stories that they
Right.
claim.
That's the classic 3 flat is
Right.
R4.
So like some people get 4.5, or every blue moon you see somebody somehow get a 5.
Right.
How does that happen?
Yeah, you've got to, it's a perfect storm of stuff. It's got to be in the right neighborhood, on the right street, in the right block, the right alderman. Maybe it doesn't have a neighborhood group. Maybe the street's already dense. Maybe it's facing a large building. So, you're going to have a pretty good idea when you're looking at a piece of land. You're going to call your zoning attorney and tell him this is the address, and he's going to say there have been 5 other rezonings on this block in the last year. Looks good. Or I know that neighborhood group, and they're not going to allow this.
So it's pretty easy. Well, I shouldn't say pretty easy, but you can have at least a general idea before you close on a project of what zoning you think as a developer you might be able to get.
Yep.
Okay. And kind of, one of the other things I want to talk about is and we mentioned this earlier, is kind of like how we're heading into a softer economy. I'm calling 2019 as the year of the shift. I think this will be our last hurrah, the last very good spring until we probably start dipping into a recession and go into a buyer's market. For developers, how does that change things for you?
It changes the projects you're looking at. I mean, what I would say now is what I've done last cycle in terms of like the B locations, that's probably going to drop.
Okay.
You're probably looking at A+ locations. I'm wondering if the shift is just going to be a normalization of everything. People are still going to be out there buying. People are still going to be building. It's just a case of figuring out where are people going to want to buy, what price point are they buying at. You're really going to look at inventory. Like, I sold 1622 Erie, top of the Westtown market.
Right.
Like, look at Westtown right now. It's as bad as Lakeview. There's like 24 single-family homes that are sitting on that market about 200 or 250 grand cheaper than the top of that market.
Yeah. I think that's a big thing. And I think a lot of people have been, and I've said this before, but a lot of people keep talking about a bubble and all this stuff. And I think it's younger people who have never actually experienced markets. But, we had the worst economy of all time, and we had way too many sellers and no buyers. And then we flipped into like a great real estate economy with way too many buyers and not enough sellers. And I believe we're just heading towards a normal market. And real estate wasn't designed to sell in 24 hours.
Right.
And I think people now that they're seeing that, they're just, and I feel like it's a lot of the younger generation they're seeing. They're like, why is my house on the market for 4 days? Like, what's going on? And it's crazy to think, but like when I talk to my old man who's been doing real estate for 40 years and everybody else, they're like, listen, like 90 days is like average. Like, things don't just like you put it on and they sell. Like prices don't go up 50% every year,
So I think
everything's not going to be multiple bids.
Right. No, for sure. And I think the product's going to make a difference now. It's like you have to have something nice, something that's nicer than everyone else. I think there was this atmosphere in Chicago maybe for the past 5 years. Basically, you didn't need any design. You could just build it and you could do whatever you wanted, right? You could have your cousin in a different country pick the finishes and, the place would be ugly and it would sell. Like that stuff's not going to work anymore. You've got to have nice products with no quirks, and just good quality.
What about, and like kind of talking about like that and going into a softer economy, is there like projects a lot of times you hear are delayed? Like how does a project get delayed? And like, do you think as we head into a softer market, like projects will get delayed more? Because maybe people are spread thin, or like, what do you think is going to happen there?
Like what kind of projects? Like big projects?
Like just both, you know what I mean? Because like one of the things, like even I'm under contract on a place and it doesn't, we'll see if it gets built,
Really?
But and that's a big thing too. Like for people buying new construction condos, you got to sell a certain percentage before they close on the land. Yeah. And then once they close on the land, then they'll build, right? Hopefully. But even like on like regular single families and 2 to 3 flats, I'm just wondering if people are going to try to, I don't know, maybe quote unquote cheap out to try to delay paying their help or something like that. Do you think anything that's going to happen? I'm just more or less curious on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think on a smaller scale, you're probably just going to like keep knocking through these projects. I think the delays are on these medium-sized to bigger projects that have much more complex financing structures.
Yeah.
And I think we'll for sure see a couple of those start to dry up a little bit. Couple halfway through, couple holes in the ground. I just think it's inevitable, right? I even wonder, they say there's something like 53 skyscrapers under construction in Chicago right now. So who is filling these, right? Where is all that commercial real estate square footage going to?
Yeah.
You have to imagine that some of those buildings are going to have some trouble, or if they get built, end up changing ownership pretty quickly afterwards.
Well, that's to me, I think we're going to see a rental bubble. And I think that's where a lot of inventory is going to come from, is that all these new construction that are building as rentals and are getting, $3,200 for a one bedroom, that people, as much as the economists think that younger people are stupid, I think people are just going to get sick of paying that type of money.
Sure.
And they're going to flip to condos,
And the one thing I don't understand in the market right now is a lot of people that are concerned with interest rates are going up. Yeah, no shit, interest rates are going up.
Right.
We all know this 100%.
Right.
So now is a great time actually to kind of get out of a higher pay, higher rental unit.
Right.
And own something. For every time there's an interest rate hike, it's still the lowest interest is going to be for, the next few years.
American average is 7%. So we've just seen a fictitious low because the economy was bad, but when the economy is good, it's going to get back up there, and that's one of the things they're trying to do. So trying to take advantage of this. What about where do you want to head with the development game? Like, where do you see yourself 5 years from now with this?
Yeah, I mean, I hope, doing slightly bigger projects. I love doing it, so, I would consider myself more of a boutique builder anyway. I think I have access to enough financing that if people were bringing me bigger projects, that I would be able to do them, that I work with builders that can build bigger projects. So that's really just an opportunity thing. It's not that I'm saying no to those deals, but it takes years and years of cultivating the right network of people for those opportunities. But I think building, just good quality, nice looking homes and multi-unit buildings, at a steady pace, at a good scale, that doesn't have a whole ton of risk associated with it.
Well, you have to keep an eye out because there's the oldest saying in the book, which is you don't get rich in good markets, you get rich in bad markets. So these big opportunities will probably be coming in the next 24 months or so.
I think the competition is going to get, not necessarily get wiped out, but a lot of people that do a lot of projects with small margins, they disappear pretty quickly.
It's going to thin out. It's just like what I've been saying in our business as well. So, so we have something called the Fast Five, where the guests host ask you 5 questions. So, Mr. Piazza?
All right. You ready?
Ready.
They're going to be really fast. What is the best piece of advice you ever received?
Think happy thoughts.
Okay.
Do you love to win or hate to lose?
My favorite question.
Love to win.
Okay.
That's the corporate right answer, by the way.
Who's your biggest hero?
Oh, good question. John F. Kennedy.
Ooh, okay.
Sorry, correction, Robert F. Kennedy.
Oh, okay.
All right. And if you could have one superpower, what would that be?
Invisibility.
That's a good one.
Okay.
And the last one, no, I guess it's not that. What makes you Chicago?
That I'm Irish and that I live here and that I love it here.
Nice. So where can people find you, and what do you want to plug?
Yeah, people can find me through you. Merrion Development Group. I have a small web presence. I am it on Instagram. I probably should showcase some of my design a little more. But, I've been doing a few custom homes this year, working with a lot of people at our age. I'm 32, people that are doing their first house.
Right.
And, I'd love the opportunity to work with more people considering, new construction, single families from the ground up.
Nice. So make sure to tune in our next episode and subscribe to our podcast. Thanks for listening to the Matt Laricy Project.